Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are doing a small tutorial, two-player tutorial. I'm being tutored by Aristotle about Smolensk OCS, and we're looking at the special rules for Scenario 2, which are the same as Scenario 1. And as per the special rule, there are a couple of German units that need to be placed on the map. So offboard, there's counters, offboard boxes.
German offboard boxes.
German offboard boxes.
If you click on the offboard boxes dialog,
Right.
It should be one of them.
Okay, so German offboard boxes, there you go. Okay, great.
Now in here is a box for their markers, whether that be reserve or supply cache. They're breakdown regiments, which are limited by counter limit. So when you use them, you need to take them from the box rather than generating a new counter. And the third box here is a setup division draw pile, which is specifically here just for that function of setting up the first scenario.
Great.
So, however, in the manual, the setup order is Soviets first. So, I'll allow you to set your stuff up first. I can show you where you can find it.
Okay.
In the Russian setup box, which is in the same dialog, offboard boxes.
Russian setup.
Yep. There are 4 separate lines here. The first one can be stacked with any headquarters on the map. The second one can be within 3 hexes of the 2 Smolensk major and minor city hexes. And the second and third ones are your aircraft that are active, inactive, and then active.
Okay. Stacked with HQs, any HQ.
Yep.
Well, I'm a newbie to this, so forgive me if I make any tragic and serious mistakes.
Well, a best way for me to keep track and help you is if you go to your OCS, do you see File in the very top left?
Yes.
If you hover over that and click Preferences, by ticking the box Auto Report Moves and Center on Opponent's Moves, the log will show any counter movements, and it will center the camera on any moves that your opponent does with yours or his counters.
So, you meant auto report moves and center on report moves?
Yeah, center on opponent's moves. Now, this comes with basically a gentleman's agreement that when it's your turn, I won't touch any counters to make sure that your screen isn't stuffed around with, and same goes vice versa.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good to me. Okay.
So that way now, when you place something down out of your Russian setup box, I'll see where you put it.
Okay. Okay.
So with the stacked with HQs thing, easiest thing to do would be to locate your HQs around the map. Now, Vassal has a dialog for that.
Okay.
If you go to Counter Highlights, which is the rightmost button, and you click Soviet HQ, it'll put a purple border around every HQ that you currently have deployed.
I see. I see. There are stacking limits, though, correct?
Yes, up to 10 regimental equivalents in a hex, which you'd probably only cross if you decided to put everything in that setup dialog into one hex, which already has quite a few units there.
I understand. Okay. I'm just going to put them next to the HQ that they're going to go in for now, and then I'm going to stack them below.
It's up to you. At the end of the day, they have to be stacked with the HQ, and the order of stacking is up to you, but generally it's customary to keep the headquarters on top, the supply and trucks and transport points at the bottom, and combat units in between.
Okay, will do. Just for the convenience, I suppose. for now. Now what happens if there's an HQ? I can stack an HQ with another HQ?
That's the second line
Right.
that you might be looking at, which can only be placed around the 2 hexes of Smolensk, the major and minor city ones, within 3 hexes of them.
Okay. Counter highlights. Does it have a Smolensk? Nope. Resina, Res. Well, there's Smolensk.
Roughly the middle of the map.
Mm-hmm. Any active airbase?
Yes. Now, you know that there's off-map air bases?
Yes.
Yep. Do you know how to access them?
I would say to go to off-board boxes, Russian airfields.
Yep. Of course, you can also put them on the map.
Okay, I can put them as inactive.
Yeah.
Go
Now
there.
I imagine you already know that inactive planes we generally put under the airbase and active ones above.
Okay, but this is off.
Off-board, yeah, it has its own special thing.
So they need to go on any airbase. They cannot go off-board, can they?
No, you can place these aircraft in the off-board
Okay.
thing. So either on-board or off-board, up to you. But if they're on-board, on on-board air bases, place the inactive ones under the airbase and the active ones above.
Okay, just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna just put them in the off-box box. And I need to go back to the map. Let's see, I'll magnify the map and try and. Alright, so let's magnify it a little bit more. I would say I have not surpassed the limits here.
Limits for...
Regimental equivalents.
Oh crap, sorry, I've lost connection to the game server, one moment. Allow me to rehost a game. Do you see in the server dialog there's a new game up?
Yep.
Sorry, my system has a functional issue where it'll occasionally drop.
Okay.
That's just Vassal, it happens. So do you see the second game?
Yep, I'll join room.
Alright, now just, you may have to trace back a bit.
Okay.
So do you put all your aircraft in the off-board box, in the Russian airfields box?
I did.
Okay, I'll just put them in there. And you started placing your units that could be stacked with HQs, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Alright, cool. Just start that process again and I'll make sure that I pay attention to when I drop.
Okay. Alright, so that would be going to first counter highlights to get Soviet HQs, and then counter actions, nope. It would be... no. Counter off-board boxes, Smolensk jerks. Boy.
Russian setup if you're looking for...
Yes, Russian setup. Okay, there we go. Jeez. Okay, so we'll put the NKVD units here, and hold on 1 second. So supply goes down? Or
They're combat units, so best to place them. The supply point, yes, at the bottom, and the combat units anywhere really. Generally speaking, hey, we just keep the HQs at the top, so it's obvious.
that's okay. Right, okay. And another HQ. Actually, Smolensk, I'm nearby Smolensk. Here. Okay, so stacked with at Smolensk are these guys. And well, I did the best I could.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess now it's your turn to.
Now you placed all the. Now you know that the units in the Smolensk thing, they don't all have to be placed into the one hex, right?
Nope, I didn't know that.
Okay, so specifically the Smolensk one,
Mm-hmm.
it's 3 hexes within 3417 and 3418. So 3417 is the hex you put them all in, and 3418 is the one below it. And you can place those units anywhere within 3 hexes of those 2 hexes.
Mm-hmm.
So they can be spread out quite wide if you'd like.
Oh, I don't even recall which units I placed there anymore.
And whether that would be at the stacking limit for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, you're at the stacking limit there.
Hmm.
So best to spread them out, I'd recommend.
I just don't recall which ones I've
Okay, all the units you've placed in Smolensk,
Mhm.
aside from the one supply point that's at the very bottom, you can move around.
Okay. Okay. Within 3 hexes, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fair enough. And there's the division line between Hoth and Guderian. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. I think I'm done. I should save the game.
Yeah, if you'd like. I'll save it as well, just as a failsafe. You know, with your setup done, I'm just going to mark all units as not moved. And I'll do my own setup now. So starting with my aircraft, I think that's the only thing I really have to set up, and I'm, for simplicity's sake, also going to place all of them in the off-map box. Now, as the Smolensk rulebook dictates, I have to do the little thing with my units where I draw 4 and randomly move 4 back and trade out the units of another 4. So if you'd like to come to the German offboard box to see which ones I draw.
Okay.
Right, so I'll start by drawing the 4 units that have to shift 3 hexes west. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, starting with the 4th Panzer Division. 1, 2, 3. SS Reich. 1, 2, 3. 10th Motorized Division. 1, 2, 3. And 10th Panzer Division. 1, 2, 3. Right? And now I shall draw so you don't, the key is don't put those counters back in, because it has to be a separate 4 divisions that the other thing is done to. So I'll move those aside and draw another 4 that have to have one of their motorized regiments trade places with the armored recon battalion that starts in the dead pile. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And
so
Vassal selects those randomly for you?
Yes.
Oh.
It's a programmable function. So I will go to my dead pile, starting with the 7th Panzer Division. I will move one of its motorized components into the dead pile and bring out one of its armored recon components. And I'll now do the same thing with the 3rd Panzer Division. Eighteenth Panzer Division, which is here. And the 29th Motorized Division, which is under the 47th Corps. Roger that. Okay. I'll now, just to remain, I can now place all of them back into the draw division pile, because for the larger part it should never be used again. It's just used for this initial scenario setup. Right, you've done your setup, and I have done mine. So we are ready to start the game if you don't want to take any optional rules.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we should, of course, decide which OCS 4.3 optional rules and house rules we take. There's a few that I tend to take automatically.
Okay.
Those are, and we won't bother reading through all of them if you don't have any preferences. I just take some that don't tend to affect game balance, but simply make things more easy. So proportional loss is 21.2. It's the second optional rule. It basically makes multi-step divisions a lot easier to calculate in terms of their combat strength divided by step losses. So their combat strength is always just divided by the amount of step losses they've taken. So I'll note that in the scenario notes.
$21.2?
21.2, yeah.
Okay, that's right. There it is.
Yeah.
Proportional loss.
Rebasing limits I tend to take as a balance function. It simply means that the ability to rebase fighters and remain active can't be exploited. I don't tend to go with reactive artillery. I find that it changes the game too drastically. We have to go with supply caches because supply caches is a functional part of Smolensk. So I'll just note that in there. optional rules. There are house rules. And the house rules that I would like to take, if I can just find the page that they're on. Yep, they're starting on page 44. Right. Artillery factors, which is just a common sense one. Basically, it allows you to fire at less than full artillery factors for artillery units, which simply makes sense as a cost saving sort of thing. Barrage losses I tend to take because it makes more sense to me to make the losses from a barrage randomized than allowing the phasing player or non-phasing player to pick what he loses. Otherwise, the only other house rule I tend to take is air combat, which gives air defenders a minor bonus in combat if they're defending over a friendly airbase, which I just find makes sense.
Okay.
So if you don't have any objections, we can go with those if you'd like.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't tend to take any optional rules that favor one side over the other.
Okay.
Although circumstantially they might.
It's fine.
Okay, so you're confident in the rule book, as am I. Now, one of the last things to determine the Guderian and Hoth rule. It can either be taken in one or both parts. So the dividing line is mandatory, but the supply restrictions are an optional, something optional. So it's up to you, for simplicity's sake, whether you want me to work with restricted supply, which I'll happily do, or if you want to simplify it by making German supply simply just German.
Let's see. Restricted supply would be an even die roll, and non-restricted would be odd. Here you go. Odd.
So restricted supply.
Yeah.
All right.
I think Guderian would have been extremely greedy. Yeah.
All right. I'll be back in just 30 seconds. I have to go do something.
Okay. Recording started. Okay. Great.
Now, generally speaking, I don't know how you want to go about how we play. I've played on Vassal quite a bit, so there's a few notes I'll touch on. One, Fog of War. It is possible using Control H to hide your units in this, but generally speaking, in a 1v1 scenario with no referee, I find that Fog of War is sometimes difficult to coordinate and something that we can often go without.
This is a learning scenario, and I'm learning. We can forgo Fog of War for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say go with or go without?
Forgo.
Forgo, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Understandable. Fair enough. It's just less trouble to deal with.
Pardon my Canadian.
So then you're learning, but you're very confident with the 4.3 rulebook.
Well, as comfortable as can be.
That's good. I've probably given it enough reads by now to know it off by heart, so I'll point out anything that I see. I'm sure that's welcome.
Sure.
And you're familiar with the Smolensk rulebook, so you understand all the rules surrounding railroads, hedgehogs. You understand how supply cache markers work.
I am completely new to this.
To Smolensk.
I'm completely new to OCS, and Smolensk is my first OCS game ever.
Would you like to read through the Smolensk rules since they're quite brief? They're only 5 pages long.
I've read through them. I can recall them to the best of my ability. So
you understand how things like supply caches, for example, work?
I'll learn off of you. I have a vague understanding, but I'm the type of person that learns visually.
The most important thing is that you're just familiar with the specific rules for the Russian player. That's all. That's the only things that will affect you. Other things will, but that's the thing that will affect you most as you play.
Yes, I understand that the Russian airplanes are restricted in their abilities.
Yep, they cannot operate in the reaction phase or the exploitation phase. They can only operate in your they can't do hip shoots either.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a bit restricted in what they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, most things we'll run into before we have the chance to actually disobey or break them. So I think we'll be fine.
Okay.
In such a case, if you would like me to go through my turn, which I won't take very long.
Okay.
I've played Smolensk a few times, but I can curate as to what I'm doing if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay. So, opening up the OCS turn summary, the weather and the first player have already been determined, and by default, normal weather on the first scenario of July 8th.
Okay.
And the first player, as outlined by the Smolensk Scenario setup, is the Axis player, me.
Okay.
So I'll start with my aircraft refit, which in this specific circumstance, if you open up the German airfields, will be quite easy. I'll simply just be moving all inactive aircraft in the Luftwaffe box, which has an unlimited refit, into the active side. So now they're all active. That's my aircraft refit phase over. I'm now going to enter the reinforcement phase. I don't receive any new units. I already know that off by heart. I don't have to check. I do get to... never mind, we lost connection to the server again. Let me just briefly rehost that.
Mm-hmm.
And rejoin. Sorry, it's a 10-second process when I drop, so it's not too frustrating.
Okay.
All right, so the map should represent itself to you in the exact same form that it was before.
Okay, except I should be able to see now the aircraft, the German airfields, as active, which is great. Okay, good.
Great. All right, so I do get to roll on a supply table. Now, I personally like to look at my supply tables in a web browser on a PDF, but if you'd like to look at it within the game, you can go to Smolensk charts and go to Axis, supply and replacement rolls, and I'll be rolling on my Axis supply table.
Sure.
Right. So, in the early game, which is before the 19th of August, and since we're playing the short scenario, we'll never reach the 19th of August, I'll roll 2 dice. I roll a 5, which gives me 5 supply points. Now, according to the rules which we've taken, I need to split this between Hoth and Guderian.
Okay.
So that would be 3, and the odd supply point needs to go to Guderian. So that'd be 3 supply points to Guderian and 2 to Hoth. So the Hoth, who operates on the northern half of the map, has at the beginning of the game only one logical supply entry point, which is entry K.
Gotcha.
So I will put 2 supply points of Hoth supply at entry K. Now, the rest of the entry points are occupied by Guderian's units. He has I would say, unequal share of the map entry points at the start of the game, and generally for the rest of the game as well. So I have more options as to where I'm going to put those particular 3 supply points. Now, I'm going to take advantage of entry F, which I hold on the southern side of the map. Now, some players might be confused as to how I can put supply into entry F. The Smolensk manual outlines for the Axis that map edge hexes west of 10.xx. 10.xx is a line that is on the eastern side of the Drut River,
Mm-hmm.
If you can identify the latitudinal 10 line.
I see it. 10.
Any map edge hexes west of 10, where any type of road or railroad enters the map, are an access supply source. That includes 8, which is entry F outlined on the map.
And that's
So
between, that's between Bykov and Babruysk.
Yes, on the bottom of the map.
Great.
So I'm going to put 2 supply points of Guderian supply. Now, as per the rule book, the hex is playable because more than half of the hex is on the map.
Great.
If less than half of the hex is on the map, it is not playable. It's not considered a hex whatsoever. So that's why on the left-hand side of the map, those full-sized hexes are the map edge hexes.
Great. Okay.
So I have 1 more supply point to place down for Guderian, which I shall put down at entry I. But in saying that, I am allowed to put 1 supply point of supply table arrivals in a detrainable city hex for free rail cap. I hold city hex, Bobby Rusk, but I have enough supply in there, so I've chosen not to make use of that supply. So I'll move on to the next part of the reinforcement, which is the reinforcement table, which you should still be able to see. I have a replacement table and I have a special replacement. So I'll start by rolling in the replacement table first. I've rolled a 10, which is 1 fighter and 1 tactical replacement. Now, according to the manual, such a thing allows me to, let's see, fighter replacements can bring an on-map F-type back to full strength or a dead unit back into play as a reduced aircraft. And same with tech replacements. So I'll check my dead pile. I have 1 dead HE-111. So I can bring that. I don't have any dead fighters, nor do I think I actually have... I can check, but I don't actually think I have any fighters of reduced strength. I'll just double check, but no, it doesn't seem to be the case. So with my 1 TAC replacement, I can bring back my HE-111 to any airbase as active, but at half strength, because I only received 1 replacement and not 2.
And how did you do that? You just dragged it out of the box and dropped it on the map?
I dragged it out of the box and dropped it into my off-map box for the Luftwaffe.
Okay.
Now, continuing along my replacements, I can't use the fighter. I just used the tax. I received 2 packs and 1 equipment, which, according to the Smolensk manual, packs, equipment, and special replacements and breakout returns return at any HQ able to get trace supply by direct draw or else in any map edge supply source hex. So I will deploy packs and equipment to my HQs. I'm just going to check if the Guderian and Hoth rule restricts packs and equipment. I believe it does not. I believe it is just a supply point rule. So I can place it wherever I like.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the counter box. I imagine you already have that open.
Yes.
I'm going to go to the German tab, and near the very top is German packs and German equipment. So I will place it under the 47th German HQ. 2 packs there. As for the equipment, I shall place under the 46th. I'm doing this because that's where I predict those corresponding losses to occur. Right, moving on. Unit rebuild and unit consolidation. I can do this. I've received reinforcements, so if I'd like to use my packs and equipment to rebuild some dead units, I can. And so I will briefly look through my dead pile, and I'll look at the Axis rebuild chart and make a judgment as to what I would like to do. Sorry if this takes us a little while. Alright, I shall rebuild for 2 packs, which I'll delete. I will rebuild an infantry regiment from the 18th Panzer Division. And for my equipment, from the 10th Panzer Division, I shall rebuild one Panzer Battalion. And that's my packs and equipment used. And that's all for the reinforcement phase. I move into the movement phase. The breakout segment, I have no reason to make use of. It's the start of the scenario and nothing's designed to be breakoutable. So I'm going to begin with my movement, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I may take a little bit of time to make some judgments. Okay. I'll take 1 supply point of Hoth supply from the map edge hex. And I shall fuel up the 7th Panzer Division by throwing it from the 39th Corps. I shall march. Alright. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to conduct an overrun against your entrenched armored unit.
Okay.
Have you been through the combat sequence summary before?
Well, you should, if I remember correctly, you should have at least 3 movement factors prior to conducting the overrun.
Yep, so I've used 3. They're all 8. I've picked units that have the same movement allowance for simplicity. They've used 3. I'm attacking a hex with open movement, that's open terrain.
Correct.
So they're going to use another 3 to enter the hex. So should the overrun succeed or fail, they'll have 6 movement points by the end of advancing into the hex.
Okay. Is it?
So we'll go through the combat sequence summary. I've identified the defending and attacking hexes. Now we both need to expend supply points. I need to go first. I'm attacking with 4 steps, which is going to cost a supply point. I'm going to pay that. I'm going to pay that from the map edge hex using up all the supply that I put there. You are defending with 2 regimental equivalents, which is going to cost you 2T. You're free to source that from wherever you would like.
So if I decrease this, that's 3, decrease, there.
Okay, no worries. With that being done, we'll move to the next step, which is the attacker identifies its actual raiding unit followed by the defender. You obviously don't have to make a choice since you've only got 1 unit. I will pick the motorcycle recon battalion. So I'll put that on the top for simplicity's sake. Defender announces his terrain choices and the players determine initial odds. Now you have only open terrain, so that's the only choice available. And we'll determine the initial odds, which should be fun in this circumstance because we're dealing with a lot of different factors. So you are in a hex with a hedgehog, giving you heavy AT qualities, but I am attacking open terrain, so my modifier for my red and yellow coded units is going to be 1.5. So I'm going to add up my red and yellow coded units, so that's 14 for the 2 armor units plus 3. And I'm going to times that by 1.5. That gives me 25.5, and then I'm going to add in the combat strength for the motorcycle recon battalion, which has no red or yellow coding, so it's simply 4. So I have a total combat strength of 29.5. You, on the other hand, have a 3-step armored division with 1 step loss. So that'll be, to calculate that, I simply just go 20 divided by 3 and then times it by 2 to get 2/3. So 13.3 recurring. So what we do, the official way to calculate the odds is to divide both by the smaller of them. So 13.33 divided by 13.33 is just 1. So that's the right-hand side of the equation. To determine the left-hand side of the thing, I divide my combat strength by yours. So 29.5 divided by 13.33 recurring, which is 2.212, which rounds, in this case, to 2-to-1 in open terrain. So we've determined the combat odds is 2-to-1 in open terrain. The next step is announce action rating values. So we'll determine surprise. Now, the action rating differential in this case is going to be 3, because you've got 1 as your action rating, and you've also got a hedgehog, which is going to add a net +1 to your action rating. No more than 1 for surprise rolls, but more than that for the normal DRM. So in this case, for the surprise roll, I have to score a 9 or more, and I can add 3 to my base roll. So I'm going to roll 2 dice and add 3 to that. So it's 5 plus 3 is 8. So I don't gain surprise. So we remain in the 2-to-1 column, and now I'll roll for combat. And so my result, I will add 3 to that as well. That's 3 plus 3 is 6, which is an attacker lose 1, defender option 1. So my motorcycle recon will go to the dead pile, and you have an option.
So either it was 2-to-1 in open ground, and you rolled a 6. So defender option 1. So I have the option of retreat or step
Retreating
loss.
1 hex or taking 1 step loss.
So if I increase that, increase it.
And that's that then.
Yep.
Okie dokie. I'll just figure out what I'm going to do next.
Well, that was complicated.
Yeah, you get used to the process over time, and obviously you can do it without all that curating, of course. Okay, I'm going to conduct a hip shoot against that same armored unit.
Okay.
Now, it's 30 hexes for me to enter the map from my box. So, from my German airfields, I will take a Ju-87 Stuka, which arrives at the map for 30 hexes, and then the range to that armored unit is a further 18, keeping it within its 49 by 1 hex of its 49 hex range. So, a hip shoot, as you know, I imagine, can only be done by 1 aircraft against a target that's spotted by friendly units. So, first thing I'm going to roll for is flak. I'll check if there's any modifiers. There are no modifiers, so if I roll an 11 or more, I'll take a hit, but I did not, so no flak. So on the barrage table, I start in the 12 to 16 column, and I will apply shifts. So there is a hedgehog, so that causes a shift to the left. You've taken a step loft, so now you're 1 regimental equivalent or less. So that's another shift to the left of the 5 to 7 column.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't believe that there are any other shifts because we're not taking the option to shift left at over half range. So I will roll 2 dice in the 5 to 7 column. I roll a 7, which is just short of a result. So because it's a hip shoot and I can do however many I like, I'm going to try my luck at another one. Now that I know what column I'm in by default, I don't have to do that math again. I'll simply roll for my flak, which I receive a degree of bad luck on. So now I do have to do my column shifts again because I've lost combat. I've lost my barrage strength. So looking at the barrage, I now start in the 5 to 7 and shift to the 2 column. In the 2 column, I roll a 10, which, luckily enough, is a DG.
Okay. Oh, boy.
I'll place a DG there.
You placed it from the counter tray?
No, I right-clicked on your unit, and I clicked Place DG.
Okay. I tried to do that.
Okay. Try to do it on one of my units. Right-click on it, and then it should say Place DG.
I see that now, I think. Place DG, the first one, or Control G.
Yeah,
Okay.
Control G. So I'm going to conduct another overrun now. I'm just going to quickly take a look at the zone of control rules to make sure I don't break anything. It's always good to keep the rulebook handy and just flick through it whenever you're planning on doing something.
Yeah. How did you determine the column shift on the second aircraft barrage after you got flagged?
Well, I know for a fact that it's 2 shifts because I know what the modifiers are.
Okay. Okay.
So I know that I was starting in a different column, but I simply just applied those 2 shifts again, and I was in the 2 column, which is a pretty low column to be in. Okay, so
It says flak. Add the applicable modifiers to the flak rule. If the modified rule is 11 or more, kill 1 mission aircraft step. Otherwise, the flak has no effect.
So I'm going to do an overrun now. I'm going to spend 3T from lapel. I'm not going to do a fueling of the entire division. I'm just going to spend 3T from lapel to fuel up these specific units, which I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the infantry regiments are in movement mode, so there's no worries about how much this is going to cost for them. The 20th motorized armored recon is now at 5 movement points, so after this overrun, it'll be out of movement points. So this is going to be a bit easier to calculate. A lot of things we just skip. For example, we don't need to identify the attacking and defending hexes. That's pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to guess. You don't need to choose your action rating unit. That's pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to pick terrain. That, in this circumstance, is pretty obvious. So my combat strength doesn't get modified by any times modifiers. It's simply 4 times 3, which is 12. your combat strength is 20 divided by 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then divided by 2 again because you are DG.
Mm-hmm.
So 3.3 recurring. So the beginning odds is 12 divided by 3.3 recurring, which is 3.6, which in open terrain
Mm-hmm.
will round to 4 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the combat odds, because you are DG'd, your unit's action rating is 0, but you're still in a hedgehog. So your modified action rating for this purpose is 1, meaning the dice roll modifier between us is 4, because I'm going to use the armored recon unit as my action rating unit. Sorry, motorcycle recon unit.
Mm-hmm.
So with 4 to my roll on surprise, I'll roll 2 dice. 7 plus 4 is 11, which puts me past the 9, so I do have surprise. I'm going to roll 1 dice to see how many shifts I get to go in my favor. 1, which is the worst possible result. 5 to 1 column I'm in now. In open terrain, I will roll 2 dice, and for the dice roll modifier, I'll add 4 to it. 9 plus 4 is 13. In the 5 to 1 column, a roll of 13 gives me an attacker exploitation 3, defender lose 2, option 2, DG. Now, in an overrun, exploitation can never be earned. Mm-hmm. So that result is ignored.
Okay, and the defender loses 2 or 2 DG. Hello? Aristotle, you're still there?
All right, sorry about that. I had to pop out for a second. Anyway, sorry, where was I in the mathematical process?
So we were at 5 to 1, we rolled a 13, attacker exploits 3.
Exploitation results ignored. Defender lose 2, option 2, DG. Now, you can only accept results as far as you can. So in this case, with the defender lose 2, you simply just go to the dead pile and the result ends there, because you don't have any other units to accept the results.
Okay.
So in this case, we just delete the DG and the step loss.
Yep, and go to dead pile. I should have it. And
yep.
Yep.
Right click and then send to dead pile.
There you go.
Okay. Now my units will advance. Now this is a difficult interpretation of the rules. So this is zone. You've got a zone of control covering the hex in question.
Mm-hmm.
Now whether or not my truck movement mode units need to stop is a matter of what we need to figure out in the manual. So
I think
they don't need to stop. They don't need to stop if it's negated. Now,
okay, right.
per 4.5a, zone of control in hex is negated if that hex contains a friendly combat unit that at that moment and further, the unit doing the negating will not spend movement points later in the phase. So I've moved my zone of control unit, which is the motorcycle recon and combat mode in there, and I'm not going to be moving it any further. So we're now negating that hex.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the option to continue moving my units. So I'm going to move these 2 units here.
Okay.
Now, one of them is going to fall under that rule. It is not going to spend any further movement points in the current phase, so it is negating the zone of control. This is another form of playing a carpet. I've never had full confidence in my trust in this rule, but I hope I'm right here. Basically, the rule says zone of control effects can be negated. Now, the truck movement can be negated, and it can be negated if that hex contains a friendly combat unit that at that moment and further doing, okay, so okay, an enemy zone of control and a hex negated if the hex contains a friendly unit at that moment. Okay, so an enemy enemy zone of control in a hex is negated if the hex contains a friendly combat unit at that moment. So I may be wrong on this one. I'm not entirely sure, because let's take the movement from here, right? An enemy zone of control in a hex, let's say, for example, this hex, which you have zone of control in, is negated if that hex contains a friendly combat unit at that moment. And this is that moment, and it does not. So by that rule, I actually think that my units have to stop here. I might confirm that on the forums later. I'll ask some questions, but I actually think that my units have to stop there. So I'm going to stop them there.
Isn't that similar to the example on page 12, laying a carpet?
Well, in page 12, the example's a little different because here we have a trio of truck-borne infantry regiments wiggling through a tiny slot in the enemy line. When moving Group A reaches Hex 1, it must drop off one of the infantry regiments to carpet. Remaining two units can continue into Hex 2, where another infantry regiment must be dropped off. Oh, wow. Okay, so there isn't anything wrong with what I'm doing.
No, there isn't. That's what I thought. Sorry, but...
All right. That's okay. Thanks for solving my dilemma. I will now surround your city.
That's fine. That's fine.
Right.
Hey, look, it's a learning scenario. It's great, no problem. Range.
I'll now move up a few more units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. One, two, three. And as for the rest of the 20th motorized units, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. Yeah, that would be unwise. Alright, I'm going to put that into movement mode, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Place it there. In a best case scenario, my overrun by the 7th Panzer would have worked, and I wouldn't have to dedicate 2 units to this, which is unfortunately a waste of resources, but bad luck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. Now I'm going to take the 12th Panzer and make that the linebacker. So I'm going to spend 1 supply point from the 39th HQ and lapel to fuel that up, and now I'm going to just decide what I'm going to do with it. So I'm also going to spend 1 T to, oops, delete that, to fuel up the 900th Brigade, which it's got 4 movement points. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It'll stop because it's entered a zone of control. Not that I intended to move it any further, but yeah. I'll put the entire 12th Panzer into, I suppose, its movement mode. And I will just decide on what I'm going to do. Right. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, haven't finished moving yet, FYI. Nine, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, sometimes I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to just move a unit here, because based on all the previous movements, you and I both know that it could reach that point, and we're just wasting time tracing the movement, if you know what I mean. Okay. Now, on the very first time I ever played Smolensk, doing something like that probably would have taken me about 3 hours, just those moves alone. But I've, certain things now I can do off by heart. But do you largely understand what I did there? The movements, the combats, so on.
Yeah, got to get used to the combats.
Well, worst comes to worst, there's a very detailed summary as to what you have to do. So it's not hard to follow the summary. It's just when you get confident with it, that way you can do it without actually looking at the summary. Right. I'm going to move them and them there. I'm going to grab a reserve marker. Now, it's with specific markers like reserve markers and breakdown markers, it's important you don't generate new ones and you just source them from the off-map boxes because there's counter limits to them. So I'm going to place the rest of the 20th Panzer in reserve, and I'm going to place it under the units that are not in reserve, which are these ones. And what else? will load up one. Oh, I forgot to fuel up my 20th Panzer Division, so my mistake. I hope you don't mind me breaking that rule. I'm just going to retroactively fix that.
That's fine.
Mistakes like that are usually fine because they just involve paying something later.
Hmm.
So I'm just going to be putting KTX markers down just to measure some things. Okay. Okay, I'm going to load up these wagons with 3 supply points, which I'll now delete from lapel. So that's 1 supply point, one movement point of theirs used. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm just going to place it under the 10th motorized. So 20th motorized.
They're full with 3 tokens or with 3 supply points?
3 supply points.
Wow.
So that is a well-supplied group of units now. And if I do say so myself, that's everything I'm going to do with Hoth's units. I'll move on to Guderian's units now.
Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. All right then. What do I do? I'll start by fueling up the 18th Panzer Division, and I'm just going to put it in reserve. Now, you can freely move into a zone of control when in reserve mode. You simply can't put units that are already in a zone of control into reserve mode.
So to fuel up the 18th Panzer, you used one
supply point.
One supply point. And you fill, and that kind of that kind of supplies fuel for all your units, all your truck movement.
In the 18th Panzer, everything that's tracked and trucked, yes.
Okay.
I'm going to move it there and leave it there. Now I'm going to use one supply point to fuel up the 7th Panzer Division. And I'm going to do some overruns with its units. So, well, actually, first things first, I'm going to do some hip shoots. So I'm going to start with a hip shoot against the 161st Rifle Division here. So, quite easy to calculate this stuff. First thing is flak. If there's any flak modifiers, which I do not think there is, because the mission does not have 3 or more air units. There is no HQs, there's no air bases there, there's no map printed flak, and it's not an enemy patrol zone, unless you placed any fighters in Orsha, which you didn't. So, I'm going to roll for flak. No flak. Right. On... One moment. On the barrage table, I always start in the 12 to 16 with the Stuka. Now, I don't believe there's any shifts because you've got more than one regimental equivalent, so there's no density shifts. You're not in a hedgehog, so there's no hedgehog shifts. You're in open terrain, so there's no terrain shifts. I've got a spotter next to the unit, even though they may be in reserve, it still registers as a spotter. So nothing other than just a barrage in the 12 to 16 column, which I'll roll for now. Very bad luck on my part. I shall give that another go, except this time I'll go with the JU-88. Flak roll, barrage roll. 8 in the 12 to 16 column is a DG. Hip shoots are an inefficient way of barraging units, generally speaking. They have a lower chance of success because you can only use one aircraft unit, but if you need to do overruns, they're your best friend, basically. So, German airfields, that goes into the... Right, I'm going to do an overrun with 1, 2, 3, 6. All right, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to overrun with that particular unit. So once again, we can go. If you want, we can go through this process quickly, or I can do a detailed step-by-step thing.
It's up to you.
All right. The attacking and defending hexes have already been identified.
Right.
I will expend 2 supply points from... Oh, 1 supply point, sorry, because I'm only attacking with 1 step from my truck, which I'll mark no longer as full, and I'll just put the amount of supply points left on it. You, I don't believe, have any accessible supply because I've got you cut off by zone of control at all points.
So I defend with, is it a quarter?
Well, you can go to low stocks if you'd like.
I can go to low stocks?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Okay, so a unit that has no access to combat supply has 2 sets of stocks. It can, on its first combat, it can utilize low stocks to pay for it, and on its second combat, it'll flip it over to exhausted stocks, of which obviously its stocks are exhausted. This is internal supply.
Okay.
Now, there's a few restrictions to this. It can only be used if no other combat supply is available. If combat supply is available, you have to use it.
Okay.
Also, it's very expensive to recover from. It costs 2T to recover a low stocks per step in the unit. So a 2-step unit would cost 1 supply point to recover from low stocks. And from exhausted, double. So 2 supply points. But if it's a unit that you don't expect to recover, it's worth it because it gives you better combat odds.
So how do I do that?
Well, you can right-click on the unit and click Place Low Stocks. So now you're supplied for combat, as am I. You have an action rating of 1 because you're DG'd. I have an action rating of 5. It gives us a dice roll modifier of 4. The combat odds are you have a combat strength of 6 and I have a combat strength of 12 because you have no AT and I'm attacking with armor in open terrain. So that's without even having to use a calculator, 2 to 1 in open terrain. Dice roll modifier of 4 in my favor, so I add 4 to my surprise roll. That's 7 plus 4 is 11, which gives me a surprise. I'll roll 1 dice for my shifts. It's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. That's 9 to 1 in open terrain. You all good?
Yeah.
I'll roll 2 dice for my combat and add 4. That's 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 is attack exploitation 3, which is always ignored in an overrun, and defend to lose 2. So even though there's an option 2 and a DG there, because you only have 2 steps to lose, it simply just goes, in this case, to the rifle divisions box, which is in Smolensk. It's a box where you can randomly draw at the start of each turn a dead unit back to life. So that's where dead rifle divisions go.
Sent to rifle divisions box, right?
Yep.
And
it's effectively just it's another dead pile.
Okay.
But it's special. So I will advance now for 3. So I've used 6 movement points now.
Mm-hmm.
And my last 2, I'll just figure out what I'm going to do with those. I'm just going to go 1. 1, 2. I'm going to take my other armored unit now. Just going to figure out how I'm going to go about it. Just going to place my 2 infantry regiments in reserve. Go 1, 2, has to stop because it's in zone of control. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to leave them there, right? Now, this is actually quite a risk to take because I'm putting them in reserve right next to your units, which is an easy target, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in this circumstance, I don't expect either of those units to be around anymore to kill them, so I'm happy to take such a risk. So I'm going to use my armored division, my other armored battalion to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's going to actually no, hold on. I'm going to take back that move. Since I haven't made any further moves, I'm not going to move that unit yet. Generally, customarily in OCS, if you've just moved a unit, you're free to take it back, sort of like a chess move, but as soon as you finish with it and move on to a new unit, you cannot reverse your move.
Okay.
So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do I'll do a small hip shoot on the target, the 17th Rifle Division. I'll use a weaker unit, I'll use a DO-17. Now in this circumstance, I'm going to roll for flak, which there's no result. I'm going to receive 1 shift to the left because you've only got 1 regimental equivalent in the hex, so that's a density shift. So I'm in the 5 to 7 column. 7 in the 5 to 7 column is just short of a result, so bad luck. I'm going to attack without the hip shoot now because I don't think it's worth sending in more units. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I'll source my supply point by tracing back through. Now I've covered the zone of control, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and use 1T. You can also access supply if you trace around my zone of control.
How did you do those X's? Cancel?
Those X's, it's in the OCS markers tab in counters as a KTX marker.
OCS markers?
Go.
So can I trace it from
that specific hex there, the one that you were just in, is covered by zone of control. So this particular hex is covered by zone of control, so you have to trace around it.
Okay. Oops. Hold on. One, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep. You didn't even have to use the adjacent rule. So in this circumstance, it'll only cost you 1T to defend because you're only defending with one regimental equivalent.
Okay. Decrease. There you go.
Okay, so the combat can begin. You've got an action rating of 2, I've got an action rating of 5, that's a dice roll modifier of 3. You've got a combat strength of 6, I've got a modified combat strength of 12, so it's 2 to 1 in open terrain. I'll roll for surprise. 3, 6, 9 plus 3 is 12, I get surprise. So I'm going to roll 1 dice to see how many shifts from 2 to 1 I get. 4, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1. Wait, 2 to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 to 1. 7 to 1 in open terrain. I'm going to roll 2 dice and add 3 to it for the dice roll modifier. 5 plus 3, 8. That's attacker option 1, exploitation 4, defender lose 1, option 2. My options here are limited to a difficult extent because I've put myself in a very bad situation to receive an option. This is for a few reasons. Now you can see this. Now this is also why it's very important to follow the order of actions. Attacker always does his options and results first, and then the defender, because until you execute your results, which is a defender lose 1, your unit is still alive and still exhibiting a zone of control. So looking at the map and seeing that you have 2 combat units both exhibiting a zone of control, note the following. If I retreat into a unit covered by enemy zone of control, even if there's a friendly unit in there, I receive a DG. And so do any other units in the hex. So if I retreat here or here, all units in there will receive a DG, and the units in reserve will fall out of reserve because they've been DG'd. Same if I retreat here or here, because that's also covered by zone of control. As a matter of fact, I'm completely surrounded by zone of control. So a retreat in this circumstance would mean a DG. But anything other than retreat would have to mean killing the unit. So I'm obviously going to accept a DG'd Panzer battalion over a dead one, because it's really not the end of the world. I just don't want to retreat onto either of my reserve units because it would knock them out of reserve. So I'm left with a choice.
Either 1620 or 1619.
Yes, really. Now, I'll take 1620 simply because you have to kill your unit, so I know that I'm at the very least going to receive a semi-clear supply line once I move in there. So it's not the end of the world, but I will have a DG'd unit, so I'm going to fall back. Now, at the same time, it's not truly the end of the world because you have no way of responding in this turn because you have no reaction markers in the first turn, so reserve markers in the first turn, and your air force is completely immobilized. So having a DG Panzer Division out in the open is not necessarily the end of the world. So I'm going to retreat there, and because he's retreating into a zone of control, he's going to receive a DG, and now you have to execute your results.
Which means I got to eliminate this unit here and add it to the dead pile.
Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. What column was I in? So I went from 2 to 1 to 7 to 1, didn't I? And I rolled an 8, yes. So Defend or lose 1, option 2, and you've already got a step loss, so you simply send him to the rifle divisions pile and delete the step loss marker.
I have what? How much of a step loss? Step loss 2.
Sorry?
Okay. Yes, I see it now. Yes. Okay. So send them to the dead pile.
Rifle divisions pile in this circumstance.
Send to rifle division box. Control P, right?
Yep.
Okay. And this is delete.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
All right. So this all should be making a bit of sense. As for the rest of the division, I'll figure out what I'm doing with it now. I just need a bit of time. There's a few considerations to take in this circumstance. But one thing I'm going to do, I'll show you another rule. With reserve markers, right? Do you understand how many movement points a unit has once it's been put into reserve?
I don't remember the fraction exactly, but it's a fraction of the full.
Yeah, it's a quarter, right?
It's a quarter, right.
Now, notice how I've got an element of the 18th Panzer Division under the 47th Corps, just to the west there.
You have...
So I've put all of the 18th Panzer Division in reserve except for its 1 infantry regiment, which is still under the HQ because I rebuilt it.
Okay.
Now, here's a rule that you can take advantage of. A reserve marker doesn't have to be placed onto a unit until it is stopped moving and expended its quarter movement allowance. So I'm going to place it into its thing, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 3.5, and it can be included under that reserve marker.
Okay.
Now, I could have put it into reserve while it was under the HQ and moved it, but this is very useful because we all get limited reserve markers.
Mm-hmm.
So it saves you a reserve marker by moving it under an existing one. That is a part of the rule.
Ah. Nice.
So I almost forgot about that and made poor use of an infantry regiment. The key with the Germans in Smolensk is to just squeeze every bit of utilizable power out of your units in every turn and not to delay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to put my artillery regiment there and my motorcycle recon here. And I'm going to move my 17th Panzer truck to go acquire some more supply. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we'll say 9 to get back into the hex. 9 plus 5 to acquire some more supply is 14. I'll delete the supply points under it and make it full again. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We'll place it under that unit. Best, of course, never to leave your truck units exposed in the open. Even putting it with an artillery unit gives it a small fraction of defense, as opposed to being completely defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, don't worry, there's no expectation for you to work as fast as this. Even if this seems like I'm working incredibly slowly, it can be a hell of a lot slower, especially working with the amount of counters I'm working with, which is quite large. Not as large as it can get, but games like Tunisia 2 have a lot less counters in their opening turns. I'll fuel up using that 2T and that 2T, the 29th Motorized Division, and place it into its movement mode. Perhaps not all of it. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I will place that one there for 8. Infantry regiment, 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, enters the zone of control and stops. Artillery, I shall move to the same place because it has the exact same movement values. I'm sure you can understand the practicality in doing that quickly. And the truck, I shall also move just under this because it's very obvious that it could make it there. Just going to do some measurements. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Okay, I'm just going to put my HQ into movement mode and go 1, 2, 3, 4, where I can just reach the map edge hex and still provide trace supply to units. While I'm in the movement mode, I'm just going to touch up that area of the map supply by dropping off a bunch of supply. Let's see.
So this is what is called throwing?
Sorry?
This is what they call throwing supply?
Well, my HQ, you see where I've moved it?
Yes.
You can use its 5 plus 1 adjacent draw range. So 1, and it's truck movement points, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that reach adjacent to the supply source. And now I can use its 7 throw range to throw that trace supply. 7 truck movement points.
Okay.
I'm going to use my JU-52s. Now, airbases have a limit as to how much supply you can transport to them in a single, I believe, phase, but I might be wrong about that. Only 2T times the level can be unloaded per movement segment. So in this particular movement segment, I'm going to transport 2T because that transport unit is moving within half of its range of Guderian's supply to that airbase, which I'll mark moved because it can't go any further than that. and then in another phase, in another movement segment, I'll move an additional 2T, just to make sure that they remain topped up with all the supply that they need. Supply will always be a limiting factor for the Germans, of course. It goes with the territory. Now I'll move to the bottom half of the map, where the primary objective is the city of Mogilev. Very far. Now, I don't know if you've read the Smolensk manual, so you understand that if the Germans leave a city unoccupied, you get to put a train busting marker in it.
You get to put a marker, meaning that you've captured it, right?
Partisan activity, train busting marker to represent partisan activity.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay.
It's always a difficult task crossing the Dnieper in the first turn, because Mogilev is the only opportunity you get to cross it within feasible terms. I know it may feel like you're being punched around like a dummy here, but bear in mind that this is a very difficult game to win as the Germans. So take pride in knowing that it's very likely that you'll win this game.
Perhaps very unlikely, but anyway.
The way that's going to work. So the initial setup where I have to move units back has disproportionately affected me in the south, because 3 of the 4 units are here in the south. So my advance in the south has been slightly damaged, so to speak.
What I felt this is how you can advance that railhead in Brian.
Bobby Rusk? Well, I can't. I don't have any rail repair units.
Yeah,
and no, I also see what you mean. There's no way for it to go.
Yeah.
I probably won't advance it. I'll send my rail units to start new railroads from my other supply source hexes north of that. Alright, so... Alright, 1, 2, 3. I'll spend, just gonna transport some supply from Bobby Rusk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll drop it there. 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll use a supply point, of course, to fuel up the 3rd Panzer, just as I normally would do. there's 1 T of... Sometimes I forget to pay a T of supply. I realized that there's 1 unit in the north that I moved without paying for its fuel, and it was a member of the 20th Motorized Division, which I chose not to do a divisional fueling of, so I'm going to go correct that mistake now. I know that's only 1 T of supply, but I prefer never to make any mistakes, or at least not forget any mistakes. So, one, two, okay. I'll spend another supply point fueling up the 20th motorized. Getting there, boys. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we'll go with that. 1, 2, 3. Actually, nah, just there. Let's they stay there. I'm going to place these units in reserve, and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can move them 4 movement points and then put them in reserve. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll also move him there as well, and I'm going to place both of them in reserve. And I'll probably send the truck into reserve with them while I'm at it. Put him there. I shall also put him into reserve. Just that entire formation. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. I get such an excess of reserve markers that anything that can be put in reserve, I'm going to do.
And you're only allowed to cross the river from a bridge hex.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, there's a bit more to it. So it depends. A minor river can be crossed without a bridge. It just costs. Mm-hmm. A major river can also be crossed without a bridge, but only by units with leg movement points, and it costs all of their movement allowance. Right?
See.
Now, the Germans actually get bridge markers, which they can use to bridge the rivers in any specific location. It's an important part of Smolensk. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Just leave that there. And I'm going to leave 1 unit in Bobby Risk to ensure that there is no partisan activity, unwanted partisan activity. Nobody likes that. Spend 1 supply point to fuel up the SS Reich. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put them in combat positions. Get their artillery. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Nice. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And I will put their armored recon unit and truck into reserve. As well. Which I'll flip to its black side because they're SS units. 1, 2. Leave them there in reserve. Alrighty. I'm going to fuel up the 4th Panzer Division. I'm going to put its artillery in reserve.
By the way, the rule concerning partisan activity is 3.3b, security needs.
Yep. So I'm just making sure I follow that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Enters the zone of control, is forced to stop. I'm going to... right. I've put these 2 units into movement mode, and I'm going to cross the Drut River with them. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, per the terrain effects chart, which I've been running off by heart by now, but I'll check it for this. I'm entering open terrain, which is 1, but I have to add the modifier for a minor river to it for track movement, so, which is +3, so it's a total of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another 4 is 8 to cross the river.
Minor river for track is +3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good job. You should always verify what your opponent says, because they might be cheating. Now I'm going to overrun that tank unit, which has no tanks. It's only just called tank unit in name. I'm going to supply the attack with my supply points under the 24th Corps HQ, which I can supply using the adjacent, because I can get the supplies adjacent to them onto a unit that's not covered by zone of control, which is that artillery unit in reserve. They're fine. You, on the other hand, also have access to supply. For a few reasons. 1, my units attacking you are in movement mode. They don't have zone of control, so you can trace through this hex.
Yeah. And it'll cost me 2T.
No, in this circumstance, simply 1, because you're only defending with 1 regimental equivalent.
Okay.
Now, it's important to understand that once you go over 1 regimental equivalent, the cost is 2T for defense, but it never goes above 2T.
Right.
So you're going to be defending with a huge amount of units. The defense cost will always be 2T.
Okay. So I paid that cost from Mogilov. Hello? Yes, I paid it from Mogilov.
Okie dokie doke. Right, let's move on to the combat then. My action rating unit will be the motorcycle recon unit. Yours is obviously chosen for you. Dice roll modifier is 4 in my favor. The original column that we're starting in is 4 times 2 for my armored unit because it's in open terrain, attacking in open terrain. 8 plus 2 for my motorcycle recon is 10. Divide that by your combat strength of 4 is 2.5, which rounds to 3 to 1 using the rounding rule. 3 to 1 in open terrain with a dice roll modifier of 4 in my favor. I'll roll for surprise. That is 6 plus 4 is 10. That goes over the 9 threshold for surprise. So I've got surprise. I'll roll 1 dice, 5 shifts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, it's pretty devastating, mainly because they're German units. 11 to 1 in open terrain. I'll roll 2 dice and add 4. That is 6 plus 4 is 10. Attack exploitation 3, which in this circumstances, ignore defender, lose 2, option 2 DG. Simple answer is it goes to the dead pile.
Right. Done.
So I'll advance here for 3 movement points. So far I used 8 to get across the river and an additional 3 to commit to that overrun. So I've used 11 movement points. So I'm going to go 12, 13, and I'm going to use my last 3 movement points to overrun the next unit. Now, we can go really quickly with this because the combat circumstances here are exactly identical to the last ones because I'm attacking in a unit identical to the last one. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm attacking in 3 to 1. I already know what the dice roll modifier is. I know that it's going to cost me 2T, which I'll pay, and you know that it's going to cost you 1T, which you can pay. Mm-hmm. All right, and now we can go ahead with the combat. 3 to 1 in open terrain. I'll roll for my surprise. That's 3 plus 4 is 7. So in this case, unfortunately, you don't get surprise, but it was close. If it was 1 less, you would have gotten surprise, which would have been bad for me. So we remain in the 3 to 1 column. I'll roll 2 dice and add 4 to my roll. 6 plus 4 is 10, which is an attacker option 1, defender lose 1 option 1. I will execute my option by retreating 1 hex away from the enemy. I will go here, and you have a lose 1, so you simply have to die. Okie dokie. I know it's not encouraging to see your units melt away before your very eyes, but this is the best way I can show you how to utilize the OCS system to the best of its ability to win a game. I assume that's what you want to learn. Mm-hmm. Even then, you are still very likely, per the victory conditions, to win this game. Mm-hmm. You would seriously have to lose, in some way, a lot more of your units than I can kill to allow me to have a very devastating victory. Anyhow, I shall move more of my 4th Panzer units up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're going to stop because they're in a zone of control. And I don't think I'm going to do anything further. Well, actually, hold on. I'm going to pull them back a minute because I'm going to reconsider my moves there. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 10, whatever it is to enter light woods. It's not going to be too much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The only moves I have left to do are with my 46th Panzer Corps and its 10th Panzer Division. Which I'm going to put almost entirely in reserve. Or, yeah, entirely in reserve. 1, 2. Alright, so I'll start by spending 1 supply point to actually fuel up the 10th Panzer Division. 1, 2. Put that there. Put that there. really specific with how I use my markers here because they've all got roughly different movement ranges. So that in reserve can go 1.5, 1.5. The rest of them in reserve can go 2, 1, 2. I'm going to put my HQ and Infantry Regiment Gross Deutschland in reserve, as well as that unit as well, and move them up 1, 2. So you can tell it's like a mighty fist waiting to release as soon as I can get that pesky unit off the bridge. I'm just going to take a look over the map and make sure that I've finished moving all the units that I'd like to move. Now, my first time doing this took me, I mean, this, by the looks of it, this movement phase has taken me approximately 1 hour. My last movement phase, the very first time I played this, took me 3 to 4 hours. So, experience helps speed things up.
Mm-hmm. And playing with playing with an experienced player kind of helps you visualize and interpret the rules better.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I haven't been moving too quickly.
No.
So you understand everything that's been going on here?
A good portion of it. I have a better understanding than before, than just reading the rules by yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, practical hands-on stuff will really help.
I hope to.
In my first couple of games, I made a few mistakes.
I hope to publish this video on my YouTube channel. I can send you the link.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, no, I don't mind. I mean, look, I've met all the OCS people. I've spoken with John and all that. They're great people. I'm pretty active. Are you on the Consim World forums?
No, I'm not. I'm actually on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I'm in the same Facebook group, but the main forum for OCS is on Consim World. I can show you afterwards if you'd like.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. I know where it is. I tried to keep my online presence as modest as possible. But anyway.
I understand. But in all fairness, it doesn't get more modest than a forum from the 1990s with no identifying trades. It's pretty old school. It's about as old school as it gets.
Yeah, this is very old school.
Anyhow, I'm going to, with a shred of confidence and with a shred of regret if I've missed anything, I'm going to move on from my phase there, and I'm going to move to air and / naval barrages. Now, I don't think there's any ship capable of barraging the middle of Russia, so it's just air barrages. Which I'll execute now. I'm just going to figure out particularly what. Because I've got quite a few air units, don't know if you noticed. And it's here that I can actually stack them together for effect.
Mm-hmm. So in order for me to see that, I would look at offboard boxes, German airfields, right?
Luftwaffe Mothman box. You can see what's inactive, as in what I've already used for hip shoots, and
yes.
what I still have active.
Yes, I have that open right now.
Okay, so I'm just going to I'll make my decision. Alright, I'm going to go from the bottom of the map upwards. I'm going to try and, because I want to save on artillery, I want to save on any kind of supply points, and because the Luftwaffe off-bat is free refit, I'm going to take advantage of this because it's basically free barrages. So I'm going to try to barrage all the targets I want to DG now, and if I fail to barrage them, then I'll fall back to my second option, which is artillery, which is going to cost more money. Make sense?
Sure.
So, now, there's a few restrictions with air barrages. Not restrictions, but penalties. So, as soon as you go over 2 aircraft in a barrage, you're going to receive flak penalties. And once... look, I'll show you, for example, I'm going to barrage Bykov, which has got your 4 action rating parachute unit, which is probably one of the best units you hold. I'm going to barrage that with the best units I can get my hands on. Now, it's important to look at the barrage table because a lot of the time you can find yourself wasting units. So, for example, if I wanted to barrage in the 25 to 40 column there'd be no point taking 3 units that got me 39 barrage points when I could simply take 2 units that gave me 26. I would be in the same column regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to it's important to be economical with how you use your aircraft, especially as the Luftwaffe. So I'm going to use a Ju-87B, another Ju-87, actually a Do-17 Z, and to top it off, to bring me into the 25 to 40 column, I'm going to throw in a Bf-110 in there. All right? So that scores me into the 25 to 40 column. Now, if I want to go higher, I'm going to have to throw in even more than I have. And important to know, any air mission, a barrage specifically, 4 aircraft maximum, 4 air steps. So you can't use any more than 4 counters.
Mm-hmm.
You can't quite literally throw every counter you have into a barrage and put yourself into the furthest column. I'm just going to, before I decide what planes I'm going to use, I'm going to judge what ships I would have, because it is a bit of a bad thing for ships, because you've got 1 regimental equivalent in there. Mm-hmm. You're in a very close terrain hex, so I'm already going to be 2 shifts aside. So I'm going to be in the 12 to 16 column should I barrage that target. If I wanted to remain in this, if I wanted to go to the 17-24 column, I'm going to have to put enough aircraft in there to get me in over a 41 combat strength barrage. Now, the only way I can do that is by using 4 Stukas or anything else with the 12 combat strength, which would be overkill, I think, in this circumstance. I am confident to barrage in the 12 to 16 column. I don't think I'm going to be able to do anything more than that and still remain economical. So I'm going to start by rolling for flak. Now, in the flak chart, there's a modifier +1 if the mission has 3 or more air units. So I'm taking a risk here, but it's only +1. There's no other modifiers that I'm going to incur. So I'm going to roll 2 dice. 5 + 1 is 6, which is nowhere near what I need to get a flak loss. So I'm happy with that. Hoping I get a higher roll for my barrage, which is in the 12 to 16 column. An 8. An 8 is a DG. Great. I'm going to put them back into the inactive side of the box. Just going to reorganize it. Stacking units of the same type together. I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, cool. I'm going to pick some more targets now. I'm going to pick those 2 rifle divisions facing the SS Reich and 1st Cavalry Division. And I'm going to pick my targets now. So I'm going to judge the shifts here. So you've got 2 regimental equivalents in there, so I'm not going to get a density shift, but you are in woods, so I'm going to receive a close terrain shift to the left. So I want to get myself into at least 12 to 16, so for that I'm going to have to get a combat strength of 17 to 24. To do that economically, I'm going to deploy 1 Ju-88 and 1 Bf-110, which puts me into 17, which will drift me through barrage shifts to the 12 to 16 column. I'm going to roll for flak. In this circumstance, no flak losses. And in the 12 to 16 column, I'm going to roll my barrage. 7 in the 12 to 16 column is a DG. Now, I promise you, you won't be able to replicate this success with the Soviet army because the resources are simply not there to do it with. I'm not going to barrage Mogilev because I get an opportunity to do further barrages in my exploitation phase, and that would be the better time to do it. Can you imagine why? There's one thing to do with Mogilev which would make a barrage quite difficult to succeed at.
The terrain?
That, yes, but there's also the fact that I have no units next to it, so I would suffer severe penalty by not having a spotter there.
Okay.
You've seen that one shift to the left can make a barrage more difficult, while not having a spotter causes it to have 3 shifts to the left, making an otherwise decent chance near 0.
Okay.
So looking at Borsche, just figuring out if I want to barrage any targets here. I'll probably barrage the first motorized division because that's one of the finer Russian formations, and I don't want that to be being able to operate at its best. So now that's not a critical barrage, so I'm not going to allocate as many resources to that as I would a barrage that I absolutely need to succeed. So I'm going to do I'm going to pick these 2 aircraft together, which is going to give me a barrage strength of 9, putting me in the 8 to 11 column. I'm going to roll for flak. As you can see, I've received a flak loss. Now, there's a special table to determine which aircraft takes the loss. If you go to the OCS 4.3 charts, on the air tab, do you see in the bottom right a mission loss table?
Yes.
Okay, 2 aircraft. If I roll a 1 to 3, it's the first one in the stack. If I roll a 4 to 6, it's the second one. So I'm going to roll 1 dice now. On a 5, the second aircraft takes the loss, which, seeing as it's already taken a loss, it returns to the dead pile. The very same plane I revived this turn now returns to the dead pile, having not received any success. So I'm in the 3 to 4 column now. Without applying shifts, I will apply shifts now. It's only a hedgehog shift, so 2. I'd be extremely lucky, which I'm not. So no success there. And in the air barrage phase, you cannot barrage a target more than once. So that's going to go back to the German airfields as inactive. I'm going to move on to another target. Doesn't mean I can't barrage it again. I can give it another attempt in my exploitation phase if I'm so concerned. I'm going to barrage that Soviet armored unit ahead of my 17th Panzer unit. So I'm going to dedicate a decent amount of units to that. I'm going to dedicate a Stuka. Stuka, Heinkel 111, and a BF 109, which puts me in the 25 to 40 column. And now for 1 shift, I'm going to go, because you've got a hedgehog, I'm going to shift to the left to 17 to 24. I'm going to take my roll for flak first. No flak, I'm going to take my roll for barrage. A 5 in the 17 to 24 column just scrapes me a DG. Very lucky. Any lower column and I wouldn't have gotten a result. Alright. Now I'm running to the bottom of my resource reserves here. So I'm going to do a barrage near the top of the map in the swamps. For this one, I'm going to have to commit as much combat power as I can because I'm going to be receiving 2 shifts, 1 for the very close terrain and 1 for a less than 1 regimental equivalent. So I'm going to barrage with that. So that make that 22. That makes it 22. And that makes it 25. So giving myself the best chances possible by using 4 separate aircraft. I'm going to roll 2 dice for flak. No flak. So I'm in the 12 to 16 column for 2 shifts. Roll 2 dice. Oh, bad luck. Very bad luck in this circumstance. No result, unfortunately. Not bad luck for you, that is. I've pretty much expended my reserves of aircraft. So I'm going to move on through the next couple of phases. So up next is the supply phase. This is probably one of the more important phases in the game. The first thing you do, the first segment, is replenishing supply for any units with lower exhausted markers. You and I both know that I didn't use any lower exhausted markers, but it's important to note that the turn sequence will force you to do that if you can. You can't opt out of it. If there is a unit with a lower exhausted marker on it and there is supply available for it to eat, you have to feed it. So you got to be careful, because a unit with an exhausted marker is like a ticking time bomb. Put it near any available supply and it'll eat it up. Since I don't have any of those, I'm going to move on to trace supply. Have you done a trace supply check before?
Never. It's going to be my first time in my life ever.
Okay, good. Now, I've moved my units very carefully with trace supply in mind, which is what you should always do in your movement phase.
Right.
So, but there'll still be some nasty surprises for me. So let's move from the top. I generally tend to trace supply from HQs. I just look at it from a HQ point of view. So let's go from the top of the map with a mind for the 39th core, if you can see that in lapel.
In lapel.
Yep.
Hold on one sec.
Now, that's near the top of the map.
Yep, I see it. Yep.
Yep. There's a few considerations with trace supply, quite a lot. You already know that zone of control cuts trace supply if it's not negated.
Okay. Yep.
A few other rules. Multi-unit formations must draw their trace supply from the same source, whether that's a throwing HQ or a direct source, whatever. That is a rule. If they break that rule, you have to pick the part of the formation that can't source supply from the same as the other, and you have to find another source of supply for it. If you cannot, it is out of supply. This is the game's primary motivator for keeping multi-unit formations roughly in the same area. You can split them up a little bit, but they have to be sourcing trace supply from the same place. So as you can see around Vitebsk, I've used 3 different multi-unit formations, and they're all mixed together, right? But all I want to do is, like, if I can trace a path from the 39th core through all of them that touches all of them, and you know that that can be adjacent, right? You're aware of the adjacent rule?
Correct.
So I merely need to be adjacent to all units involved. So I'm going to take a KTX marker and I'm going to trace it. And because that's all multi-unit formations and they're all in the same place, so long as I can reach all of them, I'm not going to have any restrictions against them. So, now, by the way, we'll trace it back a bit. The 39th core has trace supply because it can draw back to this map edge hex.
Right. 5
which is a
checkpoints.
supply source. Yep. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now you can see that that 10th marker there is adjacent to the furthest most units.
Right.
And there is no zone of control that is not negated. So no zone of control is going to cut that supply line. Oh, and just for this unit, as you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that is also covered by trace supply. So that's how I would check their trace supply. Now, with those units on the other side of the Dvina River, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're in trace supply. Quite easy. Right? Now I'm going to move down to the 47th core, west of Orsha. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So it has trace supply only just. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 adjacent to the supply source. That's quite lenient. It's the very limit of its chain. I wouldn't do that unless I seriously believe that there was absolutely no risk to that supply line, which I don't think you pose at the moment. I've made that judgment. So it can throw 7 from where it stands, right? Now, it can't throw it here. That's covered by an enemy zone of control. So let's touch all the units with its supply. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, covered. 1, 2, 3, covered. 4, 5, 6, covered. Good to go then, right? Let's move on to the next headquarters. We're going to ignore the one that's in reserve. Now, I'm not actually 100% sure that a HQ in reserve can throw a supply. I assume it can, but just to make things easier, I'm going to pick a supply. I'm going to pick a HQ that isn't in reserve. So the 24th, right? For starters, all these units here that are in reserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether there's a HQ there or not, they can all use their direct draw range 1, 2, 3, 4, simply just to go to the edge of the map. They don't even need a HQ at this stage, so they're fine. Now, as for the units that have crossed the Drut River, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's covering those units, and very obviously covering that unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that same HQ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 covers all units there, including the ones adjacent to that supply line, which is the 1st Cavalry. The only units we're going to have trouble with are the ones near Bychov, right? Even then, not really. Because from this HQ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So those 2 units actually are able to source their supply as well.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the one with the 3rd Panzer marker on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It reaches adjacent to supply this unit too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as for this unit here, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it can reach adjacent to the map edge supply source hex there, which is covered by the wagons. It's called F, entry hex F. So, that is everything. That's all of my units that could have possibly been out of trace supply checked, and they are in trace supply.
Can you give me half a minute? I need half a minute.
Sure.
Sure, okay, hold on. Okay, we're back in recording mode.
All right, cool.
Okay. I'm going to have to call it quits in about 15 minutes.
15 minutes, cool. So I might not be able to wrap up with my turn by then, but I'll get close.
Okay.
We've completed the trace supply check, which ends the supply phase, right? Now we fall into your reaction phase, but I'll make it easy for you. There's nothing you can do. Because, 1, you have no reserve markers.
Okay.
You don't... Specifically, the Smolensk is designed to give you 3 reserve markers as your reinforcements, so you don't have them yet. That's a specific design feature because you start the game with no reserve markers, as in you are completely unable to respond to anything the Germans have done because you're in complete disarray. 2, your aircraft can't operate in reaction phase as outlined by the rules, so there's nothing you can do with those. The only thing that you can do, that you are permitted to do in these circumstances, is blow up your supply dumps.
Blow up?
Yes, you can blow up your supply dumps if you'd like. If you feel like there's a supply dump that's at risk of being captured by the enemy, you are free to blow it up. Of course, you do not have to.
No, I'm fine.
Okie dokie. Moving on then. To combat, starting with artillery and then followed by combat. You cannot mix up your artillery barrages in combat. All artillery barrages must come first, followed by combat.
Okay.
So I'm going to go from the top of the map down, starting with my attack on the swamps with the 20th Panzer Division. So, I'm attacking with the 3 units at the top of that stack. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh, the 7-3.
If you want.
The 7-3? 7-3 and
743, 743, and 254.
Right. Okay.
2 infantry regiments and 1 pioneer battalion. My action rating is going to be the pioneer battalion. You obviously don't have a choice in your action rating unit. I'm going to pay my supply cost 3T from the HQ. Your supply cost in this circumstance is 1T because you're only defending with 1 regimental equivalent. Feel free to pay that from wherever you like.
Decrease. There you go. I didn't decrease it properly. Increase it again. That's 2.
Yes. Yeah, it's going to decrease to 1. So, in that case, easier just to decrease one of your 1 supply point things to 3T.
Okay, decrease there. There you go.
Okay. because that's how the maths of supply points work. And this, when you increase them, it goes 1, 2, 3 T, 1 supply point, 2 supply point, 3, 4, 5 supply point, and then 10 supply point.
Okay.
That's how it divides them.
All right, I paid it. Yeah. That's done.
Okay. Then we can move forward with the combat now, starting with this dice roll modifier, which is 3 in my favor because you got 2 and I got 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll. I'll find out. First, we've got to figure out what our combat column is. So I'm attacking swamps with infantry units. So what that means is it's going to be a 1 times modifier for all units involved, but it's not going to be in the open terrain column. It's going to be in the very close terrain row. Sorry, not column, row. Right. So do you see the very close row on the combat table?
The second.
Okay.
Second one. From the top.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So you've got a combat strength of 6, and I've got a combat strength of 14 plus 16. So 16 divided by 6, 2.66. So I'm in the 3 to 1 in very close terrain, which is the equivalent of 1 to 1 in open terrain. So not amazing odds. I'm really relying on a surprise roll here. So I want to roll. Beautiful. That's exactly what I need. So I'm going to roll 1 dice to see what my shift is. 3. So I'm going to go from 3 to 1 in very close terrain to 1, 2, 3, 9 to 1 in very close terrain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll 2 dice for my combat and add 3 to it. Ooh, not great. 4 plus 3 is 7. So 7 is attacker option 1, defender lose 1 option 1. In such a circumstance as this, I am going to preserve my units and retreat 1 hex. Well, hold on. I need to actually look at the rules to see if everything in the hex must retreat. I don't believe they do, but sometimes I just think up stupid rules and make sure that they don't exist, which is generally not a bad thing to do. So, in the rules, under retreats, retreat. All units involved must retreat a number of hexes, so involved in the combat. Yeah, all right, that's simple enough. So I've retreated my involved units. You have a lose 1, so you simply die. Unit goes to the rifle box, rifle division box. Okie dokie. My next combat is going to be against the rifle division. I didn't fire any artillery, did I? No, I guess I didn't find it necessary. I missed some targets, so some of this is going to be a bit more brutal than it needs to be. All right, so do you see the... I'm going to put a KTX marker over what I'm attacking. You see what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to attack that hex using all adjacent units. So I'm talking about the infantry regiments from the 20th Motorized and 7th Panzer and the armored battalion from the 12th Panzer Division. So I'm going to supply them, to keep matters simple, from the wagon. That just keeps things simple. So I'm going to put 2 supply points and 1 T on the wagon because it cost me 1 to make that attack. You can supply yourself from either the HQ at Gorodok or from Vitebsk itself in your supply points there. It's only going to cost you 1 T.
There you go. That's done. How come it didn't log in the...
Sorry?
It doesn't seem to have been logged.
Does what? Sorry, I didn't understand.
It did not log the decrease in supply. Is that normal?
It didn't log the supply?
Yeah, I see the purple writing in the status.
Oh, yeah, it's not going to log things like that. It only logs unit movements, which I think is a flaw, but there's not much I can do about it.
That's fine.
It's just important to pay close attention when your opponent is touching his supply.
Okay.
My action rating unit will be the armored battalion.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's get down to the math of it. So you've got a combat strength of 6th. You're in a hedgehog, so you've got heavy AT. So my armor unit is 3 times 1.5 because you've got AT there. So I've got 4.5 for the armor unit plus 8 for the 2 regiments. So I'm attacking with 12.5, and you are defending with 6. Dice roll, so that's 2 to 1. So we're starting the 2 to 1 open terrain column. This isn't the greatest odds in the world, especially considering what's going to happen now. You're in a hedgehog with a 2 action rating, so actually you've got a 3 action rating. So I've only got a dice roll modifier of 1 in my favor, the lowest of the game so far. So I'm going to roll for surprise and hope for the best. 5 plus 2. 1 is 8, so no surprise. So I remain in the 2 to 1 open terrain column. So I'm going to roll 2 dice for my combat and add 1 to it. That's 6 plus 1 is 7. That's attacker lose 1, defender option 1. I'm going to send my armored battalion to the dead pile, and you have an option. You can either die or retreat.
Now, where could I possibly retreat?
You can retreat in any direction that is away from the enemy. So it has to be a hex that can be perceived as away from the enemy. Now, you can't retreat into hexes where there was once an enemy and they are now dead. So you can't retreat into this hex where I had a unit that is now dead. So you can retreat into this hex, this hex, this hex, and you can also retreat to this hex. That's part of the rules because you're allowed to bend the definition of what is locally to the rear. If there's friendly units there, but you can't really retreat adjacent to a unit if there's no friendly units there. It's a very interpretable rule, but most of the time it's quite easy for players to determine what makes sense and what doesn't. So yeah,
it's a bit like diplomacy. Yeah. Okay, I'll retreat here. But why is it taking with it the?
I'll put it. It's fine. It's that little marker there is there to because without that marker, you can't actually easily tell that there's a hedgehog in the hex.
Okay.
So it's there to make sure that you can easily tell. So I am going to pick what units I'm going to advance with. Specifically, I'm going to advance with one of the regiments. So this one. I'm going to move further down, continue on with some of my combat. Right, I'm going to attack. Do you see Orsha?
Yep.
I'm going to attack that DG armored unit with my motorcycle recon and DG'd armored unit. So, going to be a bit of fun in calculating this one. So for starters, I'll just pay my combat supply, which I will just pay with HQ for 2T from the airbase. You can pay your 2T is required, so you can pay that from whatever source you'd like. Not obviously, it has to be a source that can be thrown to it, but yeah.
I'm paying it from Orsha.
Roger.
So I'm down to 1T there.
Yes. Okay, so let's calculate the combat odds here, which is going to be a bit of a stuff around. So my combat strength is, well, it's 6 times 1.5 because I'm attacking in open terrain, divided by 2 because it's DG'd, 7.875, plus a simple 4 for the... so I've got 11.875. 11.875, yes. And you have got 20 divided by 2, 20 divided by 3, times that by 2 to get your current strength, having lost 1/3 of your strength, which is 13.3 recurring.
Mm-hmm.
Now divide that by 2 because you've got a DG, which is 6667, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll take my combat strength. Right, 11.875, and I'll divide it by your combat strength. Which equals 1.78125, which rounds to 2 to 1 in open terrain. So we've got 2 to 1 in open terrain with the dice roll modifier because I've got a 5 action rating unit as my action rating unit, the top one.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a 0 action rating unit for the DG plus 1 for the hedgehog. So it's a 4 in my favor for the dice roll modifier. Mm-hmm. I'm going to, 2 to 1 in open terrain. I'm going to roll for surprise. 4, 8 to 12, got surprise, and I'm going to roll 1 dice. 5, so it goes from 2 to 1 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 to 1 in open terrain. I'm going to roll 2 dice and then add 4 for my combat. That's 3, 6. That's 10. Plus 4 is 14. 14 and 9 to 1 is attacker, exploitation 2, defender, lose 2, option 3, DG. So as you only have 2 steps to lose, you can die, and I will earn an exploitation marker because it is a regular combat. However, it'll only apply to the unit that isn't DG because a unit that is DG cannot earn exploitation. I'm just going to go verify that in the manual, but I'm almost 100% sure of that.
Sent to death pile, right?
Yes. DG. Restrict effects of DG. They're unable to overrun or earn exploitation mode. Right, so I will advance after combat. What other combats shall I do? Okay. Do you have to go now?
Yeah, I should go. Gotta put the little guy to bed.
Okay, so do we call it quits here?
Yeah, let's save the game.
Alright, I'll save the game.
So, save game.
And then I'll put in the comments German combat phase ongoing. So we both go save game just in case one of us loses it.
Continuation. Okay, and usually when I play squad leader, we also take a PNG file. Turn 1 germ partial .png, so we can reconstruct the map. Okay, and I'm going to. Wow, that's taking a long time to save as a PNG file. Oh, now it's rolling. Great. So I'm going to say goodnight to the viewers, and I'm hopefully overnight I'll upload it to YouTube. Aristotle, I want to thank you for this, taking the time to play and showing me the ins and outs of this wonderful game. So I'll say goodnight, and maybe we'll talk a little bit offline. All right.
All right, no worries. Take it easy.